David, welcome to Trucking Genius. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm afraid.
It's great to have you here. One of the things that we want to do with this program is try to figure out the trucking industry, specifically driver recruiting. And we thought you would be a great person to bring in, as you wear many hats with this company. The most interesting being that you started this company about 30 years ago. So we thought helping us understand the context of the industry and how the driver shortage has impacted this industry over the last couple of years, it would be great to pull you in. So thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
So let's start there. Take us back to your first experiences with the company, how you started it, why you started it, and then maybe about the evolution of where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. The company is 31 years old. I had 9 years of trucking experience before I started the company, TransForce. And when we started the company, it was much more carrier focused. So we worked primarily with third-party logistics companies, starting with startups. Our first opportunity was to work with Montgomery Wards in Washington, D.C., where we were consolidating 2 warehouses into one. My partner in TransForce was the third-party logistics company. So we joined partners with him to get the drivers up and going, where they worked on the equipment, while they got the routes all set up, and we were there to do the recruiting. So over the lifespan of the company, we saw it transition from being more driver focused from carrier focused as we started getting into training and education, and we started seeing the driver shortage come true, and recruiting become more difficult. We focused more on the driver and being the advocate for the driver, finding the right opportunity for the driver. And that's sort of how the company has transitioned over the 30 years.
You mentioned that in the meeting we had last week together, the transition from carrier focus to driver focus. We've been working together for a little over 4 years now. And, I came into TransForce very much carrier focused. We were servicing the carrier, trying to find them drivers. It's interesting to have that perspective, and I think I've evolved the way I think about it to become more driver focused. It's interesting that you made that transition. I've made it because you put the model in place. But now that I see how it works and how important the driver is to the carriers and to our company, I think it was the right thing to do, and will continue to do so. How has the driver shortage impacted you and the company, would you say, over the last 5 to 10 years? I mean, we've been together for 4 years, so we've been in the middle of it. We've been navigating through this driver shortage for years. How has it changed your perspective? Where are you today as far as what do you think about it? And where is it going to go in the next couple of years? Do we anticipate coming out of this driver shortage in the near term?
Well, I don't think so. I think the economy slowdown has helped make recruiting easier, but it sure hasn't taken away the shortage. The way I look at this is that we have a quality driver shortage, maybe not necessarily an overall driver shortage, but a quality driver shortage. And as the carriers are under more scrutiny on their safety records, carriers are, insurance is an issue for carriers today because of their safety records. They have to ask for a higher quality person with experience or a good quality driver coming out of the schools.
When you think about the macro level, the industry level, I don't think anybody disagrees that there is a driver shortage. Some people may come in and say, hey, this is economics, right? The markets are working, the labor markets are working, freight is moving. There doesn't seem to be any gap in service. Why would we think that there is a driver shortage? Supply should equal demand in the long run. What I see is a gap in information. So the drivers may not have all the information that they need, but it's just a lag. So in the short term, there may be a driver shortage, but long term, it should work itself out. But we haven't seen that, right? This has been a sustainable driver shortage for many, many years. So I don't anticipate that it'll change over the next little while. From an industry perspective, what do you think has to change to close the gap, to make sure that we have enough drivers going forward? Is it regulation? What do you think?
There's some really good things going on right now. So I think it needs to be more focused on the driver. Over the last 2 years, we've seen about an 18% increase in the pay rates for the drivers. Students coming out of the schools are making between $50,000 and $76,000 a year. We're recognizing the truck driver as a professional skilled labor, which is great in my lifetime to see that happen for the truck drivers. I think the pandemic really elevated the job title of a truck driver. We saw how they really kept us alive on those times, and they risked their own lives to be out on the road. Our administration has to raise the bar on this. There is a bill in the House, there is a bill right now that's being considered to give a tax relief for all truck drivers that work 1,900 hours that got reintroduced in March. They're looking at a $10,000 tax credit for a student to go through the school and get their CDLs. Is to elevate the position for the driver. Retention is a huge issue that the carriers have to focus on. So I think that's what we're seeing.
I want to build off that job focus, right? We have to get to a point where we're providing good opportunities for these drivers. It's not an easy career. It's a difficult thing, and we have to take it to that next level. It hits very home for me because I grew up in a trucking company, right? My great-grandfather started the company. My grandfather took over from there. My father operated a company. So we grew up on the trucks, and truck drivers were my uncles and my cousins and my aunts. So for me, it's a very important job. When you think about everything that happens here in this building, everything came on a truck, right? We have to understand how important the role is and then elevate it to a point where people want to come in and be truck drivers. So lifestyle is important, making sure that the schedules are such that they can enjoy their lives and still work and make money. Pay is obviously a key issue as well. When we see on the recruiting side, the key points when drivers are looking for a job is schedule and pay. We've got to get to a point where it's attractive for people to come in and want to become drivers. Because we're not only competing against other carriers, right? Drivers have options outside of the trucking industry, whether it's hospitality, entertainment, manufacturing. Just because they have a CDL doesn't mean they're going to be a truck driver. If it doesn't make sense for their life or for their pay, they're going to take that job outside. So I think we do have to elevate the job. I think there's a movement to do so with the focus on the driver shortage in the industry, but we're not there yet. There's so much more work to be done. You mentioned last week, when high school students graduate, right? They're not able to get a CDL license. They have to wait for a period of time. Well, in that time, they look at other options and may start different careers. So by the time they turn 21, it may not be their top choice. Whereas if we can extend that age or lower that age, that may open up and access a new pool of drivers that we don't have access to today.
Well, this may actually scare you a little bit, but when I turned 16 years old, I drove a school bus.
No way. Legally?
Legally. Wow. My brother, my sister, and I were all our school bus drivers. So literally 2 weeks after I got my driver's license, I was trained to drive a school bus. And I would drive the school buses in the morning and the afternoon and do a shuttle route over to the middle school. So I'm sort of in favor of looking at 18 to 21-year-olds to enter the industry. I think we need to be smart about it, of course, and do the right training. But what I'd like to see in the industry is career pathing for our drivers. So 18 to 21, start out in a Class B or a non-CDL truck with the understanding that we would promote them and get their CDL later to do a Class 8 truck and then get them into the truck and get them experience. But beyond that, the carriers have got to look to promote the drivers internally, into the dispatching.
So how have you thought about our driver pool today in TransForce? Do you think that's possible? Because we have many options within the company to move them out of a truck if they so desire. If it doesn't make sense for their lifestyle anymore, or if something changes within their family, they may have to come off the road. Do you think that is something that we should focus on here at TransForce? And what would those possibilities be within our company?
Yeah, I think it's unlimited. Kim, our vice president of operations in Canada, is a driver. She drove for, I think, 12 years before she worked her way into the operations. I don't think anyone knows better what a driver goes through than a driver. So when you're talking to a driver about an opportunity or you're working with the driver, they know how they want to be treated. So I think they would make excellent dispatchers and what in our world, market managers in dealing with customers and the drivers and putting, the two together. I think it's a great way to go.
We see on the recruiting side that if you have that experience and that background, that you're able to speak to the driver and understand the position to be able to put them in the right position. Kim is great and has done a great job in Canada running that country, and that's she's been very interesting to talk to, and we have her on another episode. So tune into that one. When I think about the driver shortage, we talk about the macro and the evolution and the fact that it's not going away. When I take it down to the carrier level, right, there's not really a driver shortage in a specific market because you're not competing nationwide. You're competing for the driver pool with other carriers in your same market. It's like, what did we say last week? It's not if you can outrun the bear. It's if you can outrun the people you're with, right? So when you're competing for drivers in the Atlanta market, for example, you just have to be more efficient, have a better job than your other carriers. The pool of candidates that you're recruiting for is finite. You just have to do a better job. We think about that on the TransForce side, but not all carriers, I don't think, that we work with think about that. They throw their hands up on the driver shortage side and say, oh, we can't do this. When I think about driver marketing and driver recruiting, there's so much you can do to increase the efficiency of bringing people in. Just being more competitive, understanding your market, understanding what other opportunities drivers have available to them, not only in trucking, but outside of trucking, to make those decisions. How has your perspective on recruiting changed from the time you started the company a number of years ago to where it is today? I'm sure you've seen many changes.
Many changes, but it all goes back to my first day in the industry. And I was a manager trainee for a company called Smith Transfer. First day on the job, I asked the terminal manager, what do I do? I'm here. What do I do? And he said, well, you're starting out your training as an inbound supervisor. And I said, okay, what does that mean? And his words were a little bit more explicit, but what he told me was to shut up and listen. And I don't think that has changed to today. When you talk to a driver, our job is to shut up and listen and understand what it is the driver is wanting to do for a living. And then you can make the perfect match with the carrier.
Yeah. And I don't think that core principle has changed. And I think when we talk to our recruiters and onboard our recruiters, making that connection with the driver, listening, understanding what their wants and needs are and their abilities are, and then being able to match them into the right position. Because that goes to retention as well, right? Which is also a big issue in this industry now. If you don't put a driver in the right position or you misrepresent that position, the driver's not going to stay. There's too many other options around. You do lose trust. And that's such a big thing in this industry because it's word of mouth. Everybody knows everybody. And once you burn yourself in the market, it's very hard to build that back. So no, even today, as we evolve to more automated processes and moving people through the recruiting funnel, there's still an element of that connection, the relationship, the listening and understanding. So I really would stress that, internally with our team, but externally, if you want to optimize and make the most of your efforts, really spend time with the drivers and understand what they want and what they want to do.
Yeah, great. You can absolutely use technology to speed up the process. But eventually the first person that talks to the driver has to make that personal connection. It can't be from a script. It can't be this, do you have your license? Which one? And just go through and ask impersonal questions. It's, who are you?
Right.
What are you looking for? What kind of license do you have? How do you want to use that? What's your long-term goals? Just like any interview process that we go through. So I think and then you have to build that relationship after hire. Onboarding is so important today, and building that connection and ongoing relationship.
Your TransForce is a bit of a different element, right? In that we're a staffing company. The drivers are our drivers, but we're placing them in different assignments. How does that become more important in our dynamic, in our situation? in that we don't have day-to-day control of the driver. We very much interact, not tangential, but one step removed. But I still think it's important to be able to communicate and understand and give that driver an outlet if there are issues.
While we try to get fancy with our elevator speeches throughout the lifespan of the company, it all goes back to finding really good drivers, really good jobs. So in today's market, even though it's changed, it's still that relationship with the driver and understanding what he wants to do. And when a driver wants to make a career change or is unhappy on the other end, TransForce gives him the capability to move to another carrier without having to go through the employment process again. Major medical benefits. He's a full-time employee for us, and it's our job to make sure he is working full-time. And even though he may be working a couple different carriers, the goal is to get him on with the carrier on a dedicated basis, if that's what he wants.
I see that as an advantage for TransForce in that we're able to move drivers into different situations if one is not a perfect fit. For a carrier or a smaller carrier who doesn't have that option, if there are issues that come up, whether they're not happy with their pay or they're not getting paid on time or the run is not working for them, how should we manage through that to make sure we retain the driver if we want to retain that driver?
It all goes back to the relationship. You got to call up the driver. You got to talk to him. You got to see how his experience is on a regular basis, because we don't see that driver every day. We have to follow up and communicate. And it can be through text, it can be through phone call, but you do have to reach out to make sure you're connecting with the driver, especially on the retention side, because if they're not happy, they may not know there's other opportunities with them within the family, and they may go outside to look for their next opportunity. So it's constantly promoting our opportunities with the driver.
And I think retention in this environment with the driver shortage, with the cost of recruiting and bringing people on, processing them and onboarding them, I think retention is a big key. The more you can keep good quality drivers in the fold and on the team, the better off you'll be. You'll have less opportunity or openings to fill going forward.
I've had one thing I loved about my job is that I have an opportunity to meet all these different carriers in different industries and learn so much about their operations. And meeting with one of the largest over-the-road carriers, this was about 10 years ago, but they had to hire 400 drivers a week just to stay driver count flat. And they were just churning drivers left and right. And it is, there's another over-the-road carrier that has really changed their whole model for quality of life. And they're doing relays across the country instead of having the drivers go out for a couple of weeks at a time. So if a driver wants to get home, the carrier should work with the driver to see if that can happen. And we do have, a lot of drivers just like to go and run.
Right.
That's their lifestyle. Yeah. They love it. And you should honor that as well.
So rerouting is definitely a possibility. It's not an easy thing to do, David. I think you have to be relatively sophisticated and dedicate your time to be able to do it. The larger carriers, I would assume, have that ability. They understand the impact of rerouting and retention. The smaller carriers, it may not be as easy. They may not have the flexibility to do so, or the number of trucks, the number of drivers. Great opportunity if you can do it, but I don't think the smaller carriers, especially, probably don't have the time or the resources to be able to do it. So going back to you, how has your role evolved over the last 30 years, and what has been most interesting? What role do you naturally gravitate to or prefer to be in? Because you do so many things within the company today.
So, we started out as I was it.
Yeah.
A one-man band.
One and only.
A recruiter, dispatcher, payroll, HR, you name it. We employ now over about 360 employees nationwide, including Canada, and about 4,000 drivers. So my position has changed. Where I prefer the most opportunity is to being out in the field and working with customers and drivers and meeting drivers and talking to them about their experiences. I'm not a behind the desk type of guy. So, COVID killed me while I sat at home alone. But no, it's really being out and working with our teams and getting to know the teams and how they operate is where I love being most.
I think that's where all the information is, and understanding and know-how is out in the field, not only talking to carriers, but our own people. They know what's going on the ground. They're talking to drivers and hiring managers and carriers every day. They understand the markets, the supply and demand, the price range. So when I think about our recruiters who are talking to drivers every day, they know if in your market you're not priced to compete, the recruiters know. They're getting it from the drivers. Hey, I need $2 more an hour. I need to make $300 more a week to be able to make this work. So it is on the ground in the operations where you get a true understanding of what's going in the market. And I'm sure that's given you a perspective to be able to drive this company forward that other people wouldn't have if they came from the outside.
I think we have more knowledge than most recruiting companies because we are in front of the driver. We know what's going on in the marketplaces. We've got two of the largest 3PL companies that actually come to us and ask for payroll information in the marketplace before they go bid on something to make sure they don't underbid the payroll when they go into this, which we've experienced in the past. So it's really, educating the client, the customer, the motor carrier, a lot about what is needed in the marketplace to get that quality driver. And they're really leaning on us for that information.
When you've gone through the years, you've understood that, there's gaps in what you're able to provide. How have you looked at the market and brought companies in to be able to build a really solution-based company where you can service anything that a carrier needs in the industry?
That wasn't a loaded question.
Let's talk about
Let's talk about you. So the company has done 22 acquisitions throughout its life. The most exciting have been in the last 7 years, where we brought value-added services to our staffing platform, including you and Rick, in the Drive 360 model. And what I learned mostly from you guys is being able to look a carrier in the eyes and saying, this is what we need. And if the carrier says, I can't do that, then you say, we can't help you. And then using our technology division to increase our inbound apps and better communication with the employees, with the drivers. But it really is bringing experts to the table, and how to operate this company better is what we really have focused on in growing this company.
So there's a balance and a friction that comes with growth. And it's the idea that you talked about, the importance of connection and the personal touch versus automation and scale. And it's something that, we're challenged with daily. How do you manage through that? Because it's a trade-off, right? There's value to both sides. Where do you see in the recruiting process specifically, the ability to connect to the driver at scale may not always be there. I think we both agree it's important, but the role of automation and getting to the driver and moving them to the next step where we can interact with them, I think, we'll always be pushed to grow and expand, and automation scale becomes an issue that we have to incorporate into our thinking.
So in working with Doug, our chief product officer, about technology, when we were doing a Kaizen down here a couple of weeks ago, I heard Doug say the technology is not the solution. Technology is to support the solution, which I really, really appreciate him saying that. Technology will never replace the relationship. And this company has been built on relationships with the drivers and the carriers. And no technology can replace that, but it can enhance that. And in doing a better mass production of promoting the opportunities. And if it's in the digital world, introducing them to the carrier, but the carrier has to follow up immediately on those opportunities, speed to hire. We're seeing that in the marketplace. You can't wait 30 days to return a phone call or call a driver. It's insulting, first of all. So it's using the technology platform that we're building and creating to enhance our recruiting efforts, but will never replace the personal touch.
The connection with the carrier is interesting, right? Because, over the last 4 years when we've worked together, I've come to the realization that it's not only a direct hire dynamic, but also a staffing dynamic. We rely on the connection with the carrier as well to follow through and get our drivers into their seats. and on their routes. How do you manage through that relationship? Because I would assume initially that the carrier is not 100% on board, that there has to be a back and forth communication. There's probably some issues in, the driver file is dropped or the driver shows up and it's not at the same time. How do you think, or how do you manage through that carrier relationship as well as the driver relationship? Because there's got to be a connection there as well.
The information flow can be handled through technology, but the carrier has to understand the urgency. And we can communicate that all day long. But if the carrier, the recruiters for the carriers aren't going to follow up, it's our job to find other opportunities for that driver, right? So, we need to put some competitive input into our carriers that if you don't call this driver by tomorrow, we're going to take him somewhere else. And it's not a threat. It's just that we've laid out cash to recruit this driver, and we want to make sure he or she is happy. And if you're not going to move, then we're going to find someone that will.
Well, we're at time, unfortunately. Yes. I don't know what time it is, but we are at
We're
time.
out of it.
Thank you very much.
You have to pee now?
For today. Thank you very much for today, David. This was a good time, but we are going to pull you back in
Okay.
at a later date. But I can't tell you how much we appreciate you being here and allowing us to pick your brain. And good luck.
My pleasure.
I'm very excited about the path forward, and I'm glad that we're taking your lead and following right behind you. So thank you.
Thank you.